Yasodanandana Rajana Ranjana Ramunati Ravanachari Yamunati Ravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto. This is still the fifth chapter, text 18. Satpam Rajas Tama Iti Nirgunyasya Gunas Traya Siti Sarga Niroheshu Grihita Mayaya Vibho Sattvam Rajastama Iti Nirganasha Gunastraya Stiti Sarga Nirheshu Grihita Mayaya Vibho Sattvam Rajastama Iti Nirganasha Gunastraya Stiti Sarga Nirideshu Grihita Mayaya Vibho Sattvam Rajastama Iti Nirgunasha Gunastraya Stiti Sarga Nirideshu Grihiti Mayaya Vibho
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Nirgunasya Gunastraya
Gunanyasha Gunastraya
Siti Sarga Nirodheshu
Siddhi Sarga Nirideshu
Hita Mayaya Vibho
Rita Mayaya Vibho
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Nirgunasya Gunastraya
Nirgunasha Gunastraya
Stiti Sarga Nirodeshu
Stiti Sarga Nirideshu
Grihita Mayaya Vibho
Rihita Mayaya Vibho
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Nirgunasya Gunastraya
Nirgunasha Gunastraya
Shtiti Sharga Nirodeshu
Stiti Sarga Nirodeshu
Grita Mayaya Vibho
Rita Mayaya Vibho
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Sattvam Rajastama Iti
Nirgunasya Gunastraya
Nirgunasha Gunastraya
Stiti Sarga Nirodeshu
Stiti Sarga Nirideshu
Grihita Mayaya Vibho
Rita Mayaya Vibho
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
nirgunasya gunastrayaha
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodheshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibhoho
grihita mayaya vibho.
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
nirgunasya gunastrayaha
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibho.
grihita mayaya vibho.
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
nirgunasya gunastrayaha
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodheshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibho
grihita mayaya vibho.
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
nirgunasya gunastraya
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibho.
grihita mayaya vibho.
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
nirgunasya gunastraya
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibho.
grihita mayaya vibho.
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
gunasya gunastrayaha
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodheshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibho.
grihita mayaya vibho.
Sattvam rajastama iti
Sattvam rajastama iti
nirgunasya gunastrayaha
nirgunasya gunastraya
sthiti sarga nirodheshu
sthiti sarga nirodeshu
grihita mayaya vibho.
grihita mayaya vibho. So everyone chanted. Okay, word by word synonyms. Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Raja, the mode of passion. Tama, the mode of ignorance. Iti, all these. Nirgunasya, of the transcendence. Gunatraya are three qualities. Sthiti, maintenance. Sarga, creation. Nirodeshu, indestruction. Grihita, accepted. Mayaya, by the external energy. Vibho, of the Supreme. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord is pure spiritual form, transcendental to all material qualities. Yet for the sake of the creation of the material world and its maintenance and annihilation, he accepts through his external energy the material modes of nature called goodness, passion, and ignorance. The Supreme Lord is the master of the external energy manifested by the three material modes, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. And as master of this energy, he is ever unaffected by the influence of such bewildering energy. The living entities, the jivas, however, are affected by or susceptible to being influenced by such modes of material nature. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entities. The living entities are subjected by those qualities, although originally the living entities are qualitatively one with the Lord. In other words, the material modes of nature, being products of the energy of the Lord, are certainly connected with the Lord, but the connection is just like that between the master and the servants. The Supreme Lord is the controller of the material energy, whereas the living entities who are entangled in the material world are neither masters nor controllers. Rather, they become subordinate to or controlled by such energy. Actually, the Lord is eternally manifested by his internal potency or spiritual energy, just like the sun and its rays in the clear sky. But at times, he creates the material energy as the sun creates a cloud in the clear sky. As the sun is ever increasingly unaffected by a spot of cloud, so also the unlimited Lord is unaffected by the spot of material energy manifested at times in the unlimited span of the Lord's rays of Brahman Jyoti. So yeah, this is a really nice verse and a really good purport. And the next few verses are really just as good as well. It explains how the living entities are subjected to the by the three modes of material nature, subjected to their karma, and they're also responsible for their activities. So karma is an intricate science. Is that according to our karma, we can perform certain activities, whether they're auspicious or inauspicious. Devotional service isn't related to karma. This is unconditional from the Supreme Lord. It's not affected by karma. It's not because of our karma we came to devotional service. It's unconditional. It doesn't have these conditions. And in fact, it frees us from our karma, but everything else in the material world is subjected to our karma and desire. And it's influenced by the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the living entities are responsible for their actions, for their activities. So they're transmigrating from one living entity to another and going to hellish conditions, and by pious activities from karma kanda and the Vedas to go to heavenly planetary activities and come back down to earthly planets. So this way they're transgressing. We're transgressing against the laws of material nature, but we're transmigrating, just moving along from the various species of life since time immemorial for a very, very, very long time. So I was looking up time and space because this is very interesting, as they were saying that time and space is the same thing, right? And, metaphysical circles. So Prabhupada said that time and space are correlated like that. And the way that Prabhupada was explaining it is that the eternal time factor is a very, 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 very long time. If you're talking about an eternal time factor, right? So Prabhupada was saying, even if you were to say, first, Srimad Bhagavatam explains that there's the movements of the sun, where the sun is moving one atom at a time, just the space of a single fraction of a second through moment to moment activities, and then they combine. Maharaj was mentioning this before too, how the certain sets of atoms and certain numbers, and they have a certain Sanskrit name to the measurements. So Prabhupada was saying that if you can even just imagine millions and billions and trillions of years in space and span of time, still you couldn't even understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's even more, even beyond even that. So that's the limitations of living entities, that Krishna is at Hoksajai is not perceivable by the material senses and mind. So I was listening to the class on this verse, and they're talking about the six transmigrations, six transformations of the material body. That's born, it comes into being, it remains for some time, produces some byproducts, gradually dwindles, and then diminishes. So all this is all within the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material world. And nothing that's been mentioned on this, but there's three deities on these material modes of nature: Brahma, He's an empowered living entity. He has more qualities than a regular jiva has. Krishna has 64 qualities and opulences in full. I think Brahma has like 54 or something like that. Lord Shiva has slightly more. The living entities have only about 48% of the qualities of Krishna. So in Brahma Samhita, it was stated that in the scenario that there's no eligible jiva to take the post of Brahma, the Supreme Lord will actually take that post and become Brahma. So Brahma, he's describing his position to Narada, that even he's subjected to the Supreme Lord, that he's being controlled like that. Because Narada was saying that Brahma was practicing austerities and he's studying Vedas. So how can this person actually be supreme? Within this universe, he's the supreme predominating deity, under being the first created living being and being in charge of creation of the material universe. So he's certainly superior, but he's not superior to Krishna or Govinda like that, who's the controller of millions and millions of universes. Just within a fraction of his breath is Mahavishnu, Kranadakshay Vishnu, and Yoga Nidras. So then Vishnu, he's in the material mode of goodness, is the predominating deity of maintenance of the universe. So everything is resting on him. And not only that, but what was mentioned clearly many, many times in the class on this verse was that that the Supreme Lord and the living entities, they're different. They're different. And that the Vedas go on to describe in some of the places how the material energy is different from the Lord and how the material energy is the same as the Supreme Lord. And so he was saying that the Mayavadi philosophers, they start to state that Srila Vyasadeva made a mistake. We don't accept this specific portion of the Vedas. Jagan Mityu, Jagan, this material world is false. The Supreme Brahman is reality. Jai Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. So not the material world is simply just false or an illusion, but it's temporary. It exists, but it remains for some time. Here we're explaining that Brahma is just taking what Krishna already created and its subtle manifestations from the Brahman, and Brahma just simply brings it into manifestation like that. So he's manipulating the energy. He's taking the credit as being a creator, but he says just simply only using the ingredients that Krishna has already created, bringing it into manifestation. So they were saying that Srila Vyasadeva made a mistake then on any part of the Vedas, then that just ruins the whole credibility of the Vedas altogether. Why even take the time to study the Vedas? So he said that Sankhacharya actually characterized the specific material world and put it into categories like that. But you can't really accept the authority of Vedas if you think that the author of the Vedas had made some sort of mistake. So because Srimad Bhagavatam especially and the Vedas, they don't their goal isn't to explain how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is impersonal. Everything is just the oneness aspect of Brahman or Brahman Jyoti, and everything else is negative. So that's what the Supreme Lord is, both Saguna and Nirguna, is possessing spiritual qualities, and Nirguna, not possessing the material qualities. So he was stating how the Supreme Lord is accepting the three qualitative modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance, for his creation, maintenance, and destruction. As Lord Shiva, he's in charge of destruction. So everything that comes to an end, that's under Lord Shiva's jurisdiction. Everything that dwindles, comes to an end, vanishes. So that's Lord Shiva's position there. At the end, he annihilates the universe. So everything comes into creation, comes into being, it's maintained, and then annihilated. And so it's again and again. So he was talking about how there were parallel universes. The Supreme, he's not directly connected or associated with matter, although everything material and spiritual is non-different from him, but yet these are separated material energies. So there's a few different ways to explain this. So he was talking about there are some theories that there's some parallel universes. There's some sort of matter and antimatter, but they were saying that in some of these universes right now, we'd be sitting next to a big, giant, high-powered speaker that's putting out like massive amounts of sound vibration, but we don't hear it because we don't have any relationship to it. Or that he was actually even stating that there can be a train that could actually really be going through our heads right now, right? But we're not experiencing that because we have no relationship to it. So that's pretty much in the same way that the material world exists and it's going on, but the Supreme Lord in his transcendental feature is not directly connected with it like that. So Prabhupada was also stating, he's saying this microphone in this tape recorder, right? When you play back the tape, you hear me speaking, right? We hear Prabhupada's tapes, right? But he said, so this is my energy. This is me and it is not me. It is not me personally directly, but this is my energy. So you're hearing me speaking and you're hearing my words, you're hearing my vibration, but it's not me directly. So that's the same type of connection that the material world has with Krishna. It's manifested and it's manifested to his energies, and he's not different from his energy. But yet at the same time, Krishna was saying, this is just a spark of my splendor, right? It's just a very tiny aspect of Krishna. And Krishna is within it as super soul within each and every atom, as conscious of every living entity. Not a blade of grass moves without his sanction. Everything is under his control. But yeah, at the same time, he's aloof from these activities. So Krishna was stating in Bhagavad Gita, just behold my mystic eye plants. So there's another verse that was given an example that just as the lotus flowers within the river, within the water, but it does not become wet, right? It's got a slicky substance on it, a waxy, slicky substance where the water beads off immediately. It doesn't get wet, although it's within the water. So what Krishna was stating in the Bhagavad Gita, that the living entity is like this, or the living entity who engaged in devotional service is not affected by the material world, the material modes, just as much as the lotus leaf is untouched by the water. So he's stating that the same Krishna has the same quality too, that he's not affected by the material energy, just pretty much in the same way. So it's and he was Prabhupada was stating this many times too, that the cloud that covers the vision of the sun, right? It's only just everyone's eyes. The spot cloud in the sky is just covering your eyes where you can't see the sun. The sunlight is not visible. But if you get into a plane and you go high enough, you go above the clouds, then you can see there's the sun and there's the sunshine, and it's all present. So it's like that. And so he was also stating some other examples how the son of a father, he generally, they have like the same interests as the father to some extent, and to some extent even resembles the father. So in the same way that the living entities, being part and parcel of the Supreme Father, we also have the same qualities as the Supreme. We're conscious, but we are tiny and limited, and we're controlled by Krishna, or Krishna and his eternal time factor, distance, the qualitative three modes of material nature, our karma, and then how Krishna, he's not affected. He's not controlled by material energy, but he's the controller of the material energy. So Brahma has stated this many times in Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Krishna is the supreme controller, and he's an eternal form of bliss and knowledge. Like that. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigra. Anadir Govinda Savakarna Karna. He's the cause of all causes. Savakarna Karna. Like that. So he was stating how Maya is Krishna's shadow for the so that the material energy has its creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and the activities of living entities and the movements of the universe, is that these are in movement as Krishna's shadow, as Krishna's directing the material energy or directing Maya to bewilder the living entities into illusion of the false identification of the material body as the self and forgetfulness of the Supreme. So I maybe kind of think of something else, some other points. So were there any points of discussion or any comments anybody would like to make, or you have a question?
I was just wondering, when you were saying that Krishna is the cause of all causes, I was kind of curious about that. I was wondering, what is it that makes Krishna the cause of all causes?
Yeah, Prabhupada, he discussed this in Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure. I have the tape on it too. Did you ever read that book? It's a really good book to read, and it's also a lecture. So Krishna was saying, Maya Dakshena Prakriti Shratra Shram Maya Dakshena. So Maya is under his control. Let's see. So what makes Krishna the cause of all causes? So Prabhupada was stating this, that everything has a beginning, but Krishna, he has no beginning. Everything in the ultimate sense is nothing but Krishna. Krishna is his spiritual energies. Krishna is manifesting his material energies. So he put everything into effect. Prabhupada was saying in Krishna Reservoir of Pleasure that it's like a scientist who presses the button on the computer, and then the computer will do so many different calculations, so many different wonderful things, some big, giant, wonderful computer. So Prabhupada is saying this whole big, giant cosmic manifestation, Krishna is the scientist behind it, and he's pushing the buttons, putting it into effect. So then there are so many regulators and so many administrators of the universe, the demigods. Brahma's also stating this too, that the demigods, they're like Krishna's arms. They're carrying out this functions of the material world on behalf of the Supreme Lord, like that. So, but if Prabhupada was saying that if you have a manager, and this manager, he has a supervisor and a manager, right? And you keep going, they have a supervisor and manager, and they keep going. There's managers and supervisors over managers and supervisors, and you keep going. So then you get the Brahma, and then there's a manager, supervisor, Brahma, and that's Krishna. Right, but Krishna has no manager or supervisor, right? So Krishna is he's nothing manifested Krishna at any specific point. It's like Krishna was always eternally existent, always with all of his full energies, his material and spiritual energies. Yeah, Maharaj, you also have a comment?
Krishna speaks to Brahma. Says, Brahma, before the creation, I existed. There was I. During the creation, I'm existing. And after the creation is finished, there'll be only I. This is in the Chaturshloki. So he's explaining that he's the cause of the material manifestation. And until he manifests the material, then he glances over the material energy, then she becomes activated. She becomes impregnated with all the living entities and the modes of material, everything's involved. So, yeah, Maya Adakshena means he's the superintendent. He's controlling material nature. Not that material nature ever controls him.
That's what the Maya bodies are thinking. That's why we call like Maya bodies. That were Krishna assumes a human form, he's under the control of karma, or that he accepts a material body. It's the supreme Brahman within Krishna, and you can meditate and become God. Krishna meditated and became God. Christ meditated and became God. They say how this Buddha meditated and became God. So it's an erroneous effect. But yeah, as Krishna was stating, that he existed before the creation, he will continue to exist during the creation, and after the annihilation of the creation, it still exists. So the material world is eternally manifested and non-manifested. It's within its subtle state, subtle energy within Brahman Jyoti, Krishna's impersonal feature, or his feature of unmanifestation is a form. Maharaj was pointing this out one night in the Bhagavad Gita class where Krishna was mentioning his unmanifested form. So if it's a form and it's unmanifested, it's a specific feature of Krishna. Although Krishna exists, there's no actual such thing as non-existence in its total and totality. But there's this feature, this form of the Supreme Lord. And so everything is within its subtle form, within its subtle manifestation. I believe that they were discussing this like Jai Gauranitai Ki Jai, a specific like intellectual universe called the world of possibilities, where everything that can be possible exists in a subtle form of thought, right? So all you have to do is tap into it and try to think of it and bring it into manifestation, invent it, right? Come up with the idea and invent it. So they're talking about like this. So the same way, the subtle manifestation of vision and of the sensation, taste, and touch, the earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. Altogether, these comprise my 8 separated material energies. Or deviation, guna mind. This material energy of mine is very difficult to overcome. But those who are surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So there are nice verses on that too, how the self-realized soul, is spiritual master, he's crossed the ocean of material existence, but he doesn't take the boat. The boat is still at the shore waiting for anyone else who would like to cross the ocean of material existence. So there's some nice verses on that. Or the spiritual masters, the helmsman, and the Vedas are the favorable breezes, to blow the sails, and the human form of life is the favorable vessel to travel across the ocean of material miseries, like that. So, yeah, any other questions or comments? You have a question?
You were mentioning universes earlier, and you mentioned matter and antimatter. I think I read something about antimatter in a paper that was in Prabhupada's books. In your estimation, what is antimatter?
Yeah, that's in Prabhupada's Easy Journey to Other Planets. So he was stating that in a newspaper in India, they had recently written about a discovery of antimatter, and that in the newspaper article they mentioned that if the material universe of matter and the anti-material universe of antimatter were to collide, it would destroy both worlds. So Prabhupada, he's discussing the whole point of Easy Journey to Other Planets is that you can't actually force your way into the other planets and be able to enter into their communities. It appears to be barren according to our limited senses and mind, right? The Mars probes, rovers, and everything. There's life there, but it's not in a form that we can see it. It's actually a process of birth and death. You actually have to take birth within that society on that planet in order to enter into the planet. Like that, not that we can force ourselves by satellite or Sputnik or spaceship. You know, all we're really saying is just barren rocks and dust. Maharaj makes the same comment, the same sand and rocks that you can get in Arizona. Like that, yeah. So, you know, yeah, you have.
So what is antimatter?
Oh, antimatter. Yeah, it was some anti-material energy that if the material world of matter and the antimatter material world of antimatter would collide, it would immediately destroy both universes. Yeah, the scientist's point of view. Yeah. So you're saying matter and antimatter, or I don't know what, molecules and anti-molecules, something inverted, something that's not compatible with each other. But yeah, I didn't really go on to understand what antimatter is. I have some sort of impersonal conception about that. You know,
Could it possibly be spirit?
yeah, in the ultimate sense. Yeah, in the ultimate sense. You know, because if you're saying there's a material, anti-material universe that's not the transcendent supreme Brahman, you know, it's not the Vaikuntha Loka, you know, it's something temporary within the material universe, like that. But yeah, there's another world. What is that? That abode of mine is not illuminated by sun, moon, or electricity, and upon obtaining or going back to the spiritual world, one never again takes birth in this miserable material world full of miseries, birth and death. You know, so yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good question too. Yeah, Rihanna, any other questions or comments? You had a question? Yeah, you have one?
I have a off-topic question. I'm not sure that's okay. I was talking to some Christians and they asked me about, I was telling them about how we're trying to develop a personal relationship with God, with Krishna. And they asked me, how do we know we're actually doing something that's pleasing to Krishna and that he's, we're on the right track? That is.
Yeah, well, you feel blissful. You feel like you're making progress in devotional service. We were having this conversation with Margarita. What if it's just an illusion? The bliss, or I think Margarita said that we get cleansed, our hearts get cleansed. Yeah, Prabhupada was stating, well, even if this, isn't actually, all true and correct, and Krishna is not keeping up with his promise, right? But if it is just an illusion, Prabhupada said, it's still a nice way to live, isn't it? Yeah, and he said it's true. We have so much nice eatables, nice prasadam, nice vegetarian dishes. We have a nice philosophy. But yeah, you can tell because when you're down and out, maybe you're not keeping up with your sadhana that good. Maybe you didn't have a good, strong morning program. So the next day, have a good, strong morning program. You can feel you're making advancement. You can feel you're making, your heart's being cleansed. You can tell Krishna reciprocates. It kind of reminds me. There's this movie. What was it? It was. They've done this in a few different ways too. They had some slaves on the moon or something. Slaves on Mars. Oh, that's what it was. Robinson Crusoe on Mars. So they had these slaves. They're like alien slaves. Kind of like Aztec Indians or something. And they had this ring around their ankle. They look like what people are under house arrest. They have an electronic device where they know where they are at all times, right? And so it controlled the slaves, right? So Krishna, he gives you some pleasure, he gives you a taste, he gives you some bliss, right? And if you don't have a good, strong morning program, or you're kind of falling out of it, you're kind of going to be miserable. So if you want to be happy, you get with your program. Like that. I mean, our thoughts directly influence the way that we feel. If we're on the mental platform, we're thinking like all kinds of other kinds of stuff, things that kind of disturb us, things that kind of get us excited, like that. So it's, like that, just control the mind. And Arjuna was telling Krishna that, well, it seems to me to control the mind is more difficult to control the wind. And Prabhupada was saying, the wind, it's a hurricane. How are you going to try to control a hurricane when a big tornado comes and tears up the whole city and the whole town like that? But Krishna says it is possible by constant practice and by detachment. So that's to be one example, if we're just hovering on the mental platform, then when we find ourselves kind of thinking and kind of feeling, what is it? That's the whole process: thinking, feeling, and then willing. Well, if we're thinking about like sense gratification or making plans, for sense gratification, and thinking, feeling, so then your senses and your mind become agitated, and then when one becomes willing, right, and then that's when the anger comes in. When one's desires are frustrated, one becomes angry, like that. That's the lower modes of material nature. So stated in Bhagavad Gita that one who restrains the senses and organs of action, but within whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly dilutes himself and is called a pretender. Prabhupada talks about such a person being a show bottle spiritualist, just making a show of meditation, making a show of yoga, but internally he's not really focused. It's not really immersed.
The realization of oneself in reality is very subtle. It's a spiritual platform. So these people are asking the question. That means they can't perceive it. If they can't understand that they're feeling better or good or happiness on the spiritual platform, it means they're not on the spiritual level. So you can't expect them, you can't explain to an animal, for example, about understanding himself as being separate from the body. He can't conceive of it with his limited intelligence. But on the spiritual platform, these things are quite understandable. And all the objects that are in the spiritual world are fully satisfying to all the senses. How can someone experience that until they're on that platform? So the answer to their questions, how do you know when you're pleasing God? Because you experience it all throughout. It's complete realization that you experience it through your eyes, as in Bhagavad Gita says, he's experiencing through transcendental senses. He's experiencing. So Krishna is experiencing everything through his transcendental senses, and the living entities, when they're purified and free from all the contaminations, they can also relate with Krishna in the spiritual world on that platform.
Yeah, it's nice. Nice statement. Yeah, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states that stage of perfection is called transcendental samadhi, when one's senses and mind are restrained. And one experiences unlimited happiness through transcendental senses. Like that, yeah. And there's also verses, and it was mentioned here that the demons, the karmis, they can't actually understand this, although they may try to. Right? Only the devotees of the bhaktas can actually realize this and understand this and have direct experience of it. Just like what Maharaj was saying, if you try to instruct a dog, about how your spiritual soul and not the material body, it doesn't register the dog and the cat. They don't have that capacity, they pretty much just kind of look at you, kind of, I know, bark meow, but they're not getting the transcendental information that you're trying to give them. So yeah, in the same way, the demons that are, because of their inauspicious activities, they cannot actually perceive this, although that they might try to. And there are so many different theories and scientific investigation and so many different schools of yoga and meditation and philosophical, metaphysical, scientific thought, to try to come to some type of singularity realization. Like that, we're moving to the singularity, is what they're saying. So, yeah, that's good comment, good point. Any other questions or any other comments? You have a question?
Just had a short comment. I heard something nice the other day, and they were talking about working out and how hard it is, because your body's sore. You have to keep doing it. So it's okay if you can't keep up. It's all right. But just don't quit. Because if you quit, you've lost all your progress in this life.
Yeah, sometimes I explain it like baby steps, taking small steps. Sometimes the child, he falls down, but he gets back up and he walks and learns to walk. So yeah, that's pretty much our position. Like that. Get up and walk again. Don't give up. I know they're stating this so many different ways. It's kind of like the pep talk. If it's Captain Kirk in Star Trek or something else, Bill and Ted's Great Adventure. That's what they're always telling you. Never give up. The eye of the tiger. To get everybody motivated. But it's really, energetic song, and all the people get up to get their awards, how these seminars and everything. Yeah. So that's exactly where we're at there. We're going back to God. This is pretty much the most exciting thing ever. The actual real goal of the human form of life, finally, we finally get it. So yeah, any other questions or comments? Or Srimad Bhagavatam class ki jai.